Welcome, guys. We've had the British Grand Prix and we got quite a spectacular race. A little bit of a disappointing ending, which I'm finally getting over. And we're going to go through and rate each and every one of the drivers and how they got on over the whole weekend. And my predictions review, where I've done better than usual. Let's get to it. Welcome, guys. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoy the video, hit the like. Get in the comments with your ratings as well, please. Let's debate it, hash it out. And as ever, we always start with the race winner on this one. Charles Leclerc back with his first win in Silverstone. Come close before he finally crossed it over the line with a 250th win for Ferrari. What a drive on Sunday and what a turnaround of a weekend for him. And I think this is where driver ratings for a sprint race weekend get really difficult, because where do you weight it? And I generally give a little bit more weight to the full race over the sprint element of it. But what a turnaround from Charles Leclerc. Sprint qualifying, he was a couple of tenths down on Lewis Hamilton, qualified fourth. Not a great sprint race. He finished fifth in the race on sprint day. But come qualifying, he pulled off a hell of a lap. An awful lot of work done, apparently, from Charles Leclerc overnight, going with the philosophy of his teammate, and that's helped him. And he's beaten him to qualifying pole position. And it almost came out of nowhere, really, because but for that lap, even in the session, it just looked pre-sprint, everything like that. It just looked Lewis had the upper hand on Charles Leclerc. But he's done it again. The specialist in qualifying has come back. He's started to get the feel in the car, which was the big deal for him. And that's how he drives. Really, really on the edge, flings it around in qualifying. And that's what makes him super. And he's now managing to be able to maybe adjust his driving style, but also adjust the car to his driving style as well. So he's done an awful lot of work. And we've seen it in Austria where he got pole, but in the race, he fell away. This weekend in the race, he was brilliant. His first stint was only bettered by Kimi Antonelli. And let's face it, if on a normal day with no DNFs, Kimi Antonelli had won that race. But Charles Leclerc had put himself in the perfect position. He got a great start, led into turn one. Antonelli, not a great start. And then we've seen the way he managed his tyres. We've seen what Lewis on his tyres, really hard on his tyres. But Charles managed to keep them going, got into a good window. His first stint really bagged him a podium. He was definitely first or second. And then it was, over to you, Kimi. What can you do? And Kimi was doing the job, to be fair, but the car broke down, and it meant it wasn't a cruise for Kimi Antonelli. He had to put the pressure on. He had to put in them laps. He had to push that Mercedes to come and catch Ferrari, and they're fragile. And that's wouldn't have happened if he was cruising out front, because he wouldn't even need to push like that. But Charles Leclerc, the way he drove, meant that he did. And then he managed it really, really well from there. Had the safety car period, and that almost a little bit of a scare when safety car in, he was saying, because his tyres were cold as hell. But he had a George Russell on mediums as a buffer, I think, because his tyres were cold as well. And then he just drove a solid race, well-deserved victory. Ferrari 1 and 3 on the podium. It would have been a 1 and 2 potentially. And what a great weekend for him and Ferrari. Ferrari were not meant to be quick here. That's what we were all said and told beforehand. I did think Ferrari would go strong here this weekend, just a feeling. I'm not a Houdini over here, but it worked out. The guess was good. And very, very happy with a Ferrari victory, and so should Charles Leclerc. And I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. Rather than a 10, because I think his sprint was a little bit disappointing, but a fantastic result Sunday. 9 out of 10, Charles Leclerc. Second place man, George Russell. And I think he'd be very, very happy with his result. Disappointed with his race. There's no two ways about it. He can't hide the fact on that. I think he'd be disappointed with his race weekend overall. There wasn't a point where he was on top of this Mercedes. He had a disappointing sprint qualifying, disappointing sprint race. Qualifying again, mistakes in Q1 nearly went out, and that would have been an absolute disaster for him. And then he made a mistake in his second Q3 run as well. And that left the gap open between him and his teammate, which the two Ferrari boys happily slotted in front of. And then in the race, he was driving well, a little bit unlucky with that puncture when he was hunting down Max Verstappen. And it was at that point a three-way battle for the podium. And when he got that puncture, it looked like a podium was lost, although he would have had a hell of a battle with Lewis for the podium at that stage, and we wouldn't know how that worked out for him. And then, yeah, after that puncture, he was behind Max. He was behind Lewis Hamilton. Looked like for all the world he'd be finishing in sixth place behind Max, although he was catching Max with the fresher tyres. And then, yeah, the Kimi Antonelli's car broke down. Max Verstappen's car broke down. The safety car came out. Lewis pitted. He was going to do the opposite of whatever Lewis was doing. So some might be critical of Ferrari's strategy call on that one. I think it was just a huge gamble. It could have gone horribly wrong had we got that one racing lap, which we thought we probably would have done. Yeah, George Russell would have definitely been looking backwards, and he had Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris to be worried about. He was on old mediums, a tyre compound that was harder, and they were cold, and they would have taken a lot longer than the guys around him to get some temperature into that tyre. That's a fact. And so he was potentially looking at being off the podium again, but he rode his luck on that point, but he'd had some bad luck pre that, so it's almost like he was due a little bit of luck at the British Grand Prix, and he definitely got it, and an undeserved P2. I don't think that's harsh. I think he'll probably accept that as well, but you take it. That's what happens. It's being there when things fall apart for others in a championship, and you look back at this, and if he goes on to win it, and I wouldn't count him out yet because he's still within a chance. He's now just 25 points behind Kimi Antonelli. This is another race weekend where he's been slower than him but outscored him. So, you know, these things happen. He got the hard luck with the breakdowns early doors, and he's now getting the good luck. And these swings and roundabouts were always going to happen. For it to happen so quickly, I don't think many of us expected that, especially for Kimi Antonelli's downfall to happen, especially with the sort of DNFs on his side of the garage to happen so quickly. One was engine related, the other one completely something random and different. And so, yeah, George will just take it on the chin. Interestingly enough, there was the criticism of the power unit, and that spat between him and Toto at the end was really interesting. A little bit of, there's some friction in the dynamics of the Mercedes team with him, especially with the Max rumours ramping up now. Max clearly not happy after the Red Bull failure on his rear wing, saw him crash out again. He's apparently going to, exercise his exit clause in that Red Bull contract, and all fingers point at George Russell's seat and not Kimi Antonelli's, and that makes sense. And this little friction and needle between Russell and Toto is not good for George Russell. There's no two ways about that. So we'll see how it pans out. I think Russell has clearly not gelled yet with this car. Very happy with the Austrian result win. Probably disappointed in some parts with the performance. And here again, he'll be really disappointed with the performance, but really happy with the result. And so you've got to take this. And I think that eventually them results and that performance will come. I think it's just taken a little bit longer than we expected. But for George Russell, I think it's been a disappointing weekend overall. I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. Third place man, Lewis Hamilton, and his race weekend started with an absolute flyer. Fastest in FP1, get everybody's hopes up. Took sprint pole position, couldn't hold on to the sprint win, finished in second place in the race. After the George Russell puncture, it was a Ferrari 1-2. It got past Max Verstappen, and obviously after the DNF of Kimi Antonelli, it was a 1-2 for him in the Ferrari. A toss-up on the strategy. I don't think you can be critical of Ferrari's choice to box him at the end, although when I did it in the watch-along, I did say there's only 3 or 4 laps to the finish, and it could finish under a safety car. And if Ferrari couldn't guarantee Lewis coming out ahead of George Russell, then they shouldn't have pitted him. But I could have been really wrong because we got the safety car in notice and then it switched around when it just carried on. So they could have looked like rock stars. Instead, they don't. And it's just small margins and you either fall on the right side of that line or the wrong side. And we'd got one racing lap, 100% sure, he would have then been screaming, "Why have you left me out and left me vulnerable?" And now that he's pitted, it's kind of like, oh, why did I've lost track position. You're never going to win as a Ferrari team. I think they chose the best decision. It just didn't work out in the end because it was so close, as we've seen, even with race directors thinking we could get this going. And so, yeah, it happens. It was just disappointed that it happened on his home Grand Prix and a Ferrari 1-2 would have been absolutely brilliant. I think Lewis would have been very happy with that. I think it's just put a little bit of a dampener on it, the fact that he's finished third in the end. But I think it's still a very, very good result for him and Ferrari. This Ferrari car, like I said, wasn't meant to be quick here, but Lewis came here again. He was the dominant of the two Ferrari drivers in most of the race weekend, apart from race day, and especially obviously qualifying over one lap, that can happen. And so I think he'll be just a little bit disappointed on performance, and something to work on for him is clearly making these tyres last because his teammates able to do that. We've seen that in Monaco. We've seen it in Austria, and I mean the performance was poor in Austria regardless, and we've seen it here this weekend. We've seen it in the sprint race, we've seen it in the main race, and I think that'll be the big concern for Lewis, is why he's harder on his set of tyres compared to his teammate. But otherwise, I think it's a very, very good weekend for Lewis in Silverstone, and I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. Fourth place man, Lando Norris, and this is another one where he's probably disappointed with performance, but really, really happy with the race result. You can't be too critical of performance in the sprint race. Critical in terms of performance over one lap. I think that's what cost him a better result in the sprint race. Because they got off mega start, absolute rocket starts, both McLarens off the line, and that's what put him in that position. And a podium in the sprint race, I think, was well beyond what they would have expected. So a really, really good result there. And in the main race, I think it wasn't a good race for him. They didn't quite have the race pace, but he's absolutely maximised everything. And had we got one racing lap, I think he could have found himself on the podium. There's no two ways about that. He could have passed either Lewis and potentially George. And so it could have been a 2-3. We'll never know on that side of things. But despite that, had to have a bit of luck, DNF with the guys ahead. But you've got to finish the race. And that's a big learning for Mercedes. And Lando's done the job. He's had his fair share of breakdowns this season, and this one, it fell on him for the right side, and fair play to the guy. I think he can be very happy with the results. Performance, a little more to be desired, but he can be very, very happy, I think. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. Fifth place man, Isaac Hadjar, and he's another one with split weekends. Sprint race wasn't great, just come home in 9th place, but from there onwards, his performance was brilliant. Out-qualified Max Verstappen in qualifying for the main race. The race didn't go as planned, would have finished 7th, but for the DNFs, didn't quite have the pace of his teammate early doors. He looked quick, but then once Max passed, he wasn't really hounding Max or all over the gearbox. He dropped back, and so you can see eventually that was probably the right decision. I don't know if it was team order to let Max past or Max just got past. I think it was Max making the move. They had a bit of a squabble for a couple of laps while the overtake was still in play. But once Max broke that, he scurried away from Isaac Hadjar. And I think that'll be the disappointing part of his race weekend. But really, really good. Positive performance. Good to see him out qualifying Max Verstappen. We've not seen many teammates do that. He's done it 3 times this season. Just got to work on just sort of tyre management and just keeping that pace in the car over a longer distance than he's managed so far. I think he could be pretty happy with the weekend. In some parts, disappointed in others, I'm sure. But I'm giving him a 7 out of 10. Sixth place man, Liam Lawson, and another really strong, mature performance from this kid. He had a very good sprint, qualifying sprint race. He got the last point in the sprint, and he's had another one where he's beaten his teammate again in the race. Good battling, hard racing, and yeah, another big haul of points for him and the team. He can be very happy with the way his performance is going. He needed to step up. He has stepped up now. This is consistency coming into play, and this is huge for him in his growth. And potentially for him looking up and elsewhere. He had to put the beating on his teammate, although it's close at times and probably closer than he'd like it to be, because in the qualifying there's half a tenth between it. So Arvid's the rookie here, and you think probably Liam could be squeezing a little bit more out of the car just to have that gap and then be like for sure the dominant guy, but he's getting the job done. Is it going to be enough? That's going to be the big question, but results are results, and they're showing them themselves this time around for Liam. He can be very happy with his weekend. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. 7th place man, Arvid Lindblad, back for his home race, and he's had a really good weekend, I think. Very, very happy. Very, very close to his teammate. Probably disappointed with his sprint race. He lost out a position to Isaac Hadjar. That can happen. I mean, Liam nearly lost that place to Isaac Hadjar as well, but really hard defending on Liam's part. Close, almost got a penalty for that, got away with it, did Liam. But Arvid, he can be very happy, close to his teammate, comes home right behind Liam Lawson in the race as well. And exactly what you want as a rookie. If you're not going to get hammered by your teammate, keep it close. And there's always that doubt of, you know, if I'm on my teammate's pace already, I've got more to grow. There's more room for me, and that's why I'm probably the best option when something comes up, especially in that senior Red Bull team. And even out there in the grid. And Arvid's done his reputation no harm with a very, very solid British Grand Prix. He can be happy with his weekends, the way his weekend's gone overall. I'm giving him also an 8 out of 10. 8th place man, Gabi Bortoleto, and he was in the final points paying positions anyway, but for the DNF, so not really looked into points. It was on for him, and he drove a really solid race, mature drive in the race. He was just outside the points in qualifying, and the Audi shown promise and some pace, and so points was always on the card. A good initial start to the race, and they just kept that pace up and brought home what would have been a really good point. Instead, it's a good couple of points. So very, very happy with his weekend. The Audi looks better with some upgrades. They're understanding them, but they need to keep them coming to keep in that fight, because it's very close between Racing Bulls, Audi, Alpine. And so whoever can win in this performance upgrade race, well, we'll see. The points will be coming for them. He's beaten his teammate in the sprint. He's beaten him in the race. I mean, it was a DNF for Nick Hulkenburg, so we wouldn't know how that panned out for him. But Gabi can be very, very happy with his weekend. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. 9th place man, Franco Colapinto. And what a race it turned out to be for him, from 19th to 9th. Qualifying was unlucky. It was a sudden loss of rear downforce, so not a fault on his part, but a really good recovery in the race. Helped with the undercut and a slow pit stop from his teammate, and that propelled him up into good points finish. And to finish ahead of him as well, that's consistent long race pace, and that's something that we've seen him drop off generally in racing, where Pierre's had the upper hand. But he was on par with Pierre this weekend. He just finished directly behind him in the sprint race as well. So really, really happy. A great result from Franco Colapinto. And to make up 10 places, yes, things sometimes have to fall into the right place for you, but you've got to do the job. And he had pace. Probably didn't have points pace, clearly, because they would have finished out of the points but for the DNFs. But the car's reliable. He did the job. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. 10th place man, Pierre Gasly, follows home his teammate. I think he would have beaten him over the course of this weekend, so I think he's got too much to be disappointed about. He out-qualified him. He got that 3-place grid penalty, which was unlucky for him because it was a defect in his radio, which he couldn't hear that Stroll was coming behind him, and that's why he impeded him and got that penalty. And so, yeah, a little bit disappointed in that regard. And then obviously his teammate got the undercut to protect his position. And I think it would have been switched around, but then he had a slow stop as well. And then the team just let them race, which is fair point. But he comes home with a point, probably more than where they expected, especially when you consider the pace in qualifying in the start of the weekend. They were nowhere as well. Alpine need upgrades because they're slowly dropping back into the Alpine that we know. And this has been their weakness for a few years. We've seen other team principals say that, and that's something that they clearly still need to fix because they're falling backwards now. Racing Bulls have jumped them. The Audis are now beating them. So upgrades need to come, and we know that Pierre can deliver when that happens. Rating for Pierre, I think he'll be a little bit disappointed because he's finished behind his teammate, but overall he drove probably the best that was in that package. I'm giving him a 7 out of 10. 11th place man, Oscar Piastri, and he'll be disappointed with this weekend. He had a good race in Austria, but now he's come to Silverstone and he's, well, the second best driver in that Mercedes at the moment. We've not seen the early strong performance that we saw last year from Oscar. That Oscar seemed to have disappeared, fizzled away a little bit. So the Oscar that we know needs to stand up a little bit. But we can say the same for Charles Leclerc and other drivers as well. I think it may be just getting used to this car. It's taken him a little bit longer, or to suit his driving style, he's having to adapt significantly. The McLaren's not there yet. In the sprint, he was a little bit unlucky. In the race, he got the clip with and broken rear wing, front wing in the race, and that was a stop, and that pretty much put points off the cards for him, and just didn't have the pace that we've seen in his teammate. And I think that'd be the most disappointing thing. In the sprint, he was right in the mix with the fight, but then dropped off, I think, too hard on his tyres. And there was a clear deficit to his teammate in terms of performance this weekend. He's going to go away with more work to do. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. 12th place man, Ollie Bearman, and a good recovery drive in the end. Caught up in the lap 1 incident, and then to finish 12th, I think he drove a good race. I don't think the Haas was quick enough this weekend. They had a disappointing sprint, but he's been faster of the two Haas drivers, and that's probably about as good as it can get for him at the moment. Putting in the strong performances, comfortably beating his teammate, and if the car is not quite there yet, there's not an awful lot you can do. And Haas, a little bit like Alpine, need to bring some good performances and more consistent upgrade packages to this car, something that we've seen a problem for them over the years before as well. But Ollie can only do what he can do. And I thought he drove a solid race to come back and finish P12. I'm giving him a 6 out of 10. 13th place man, Esteban Ocon, and he's getting closer to Ollie Bearman, just not beating him yet, and that's going to be a little bit of a concern, but improvement nonetheless. He was better in Austria, better this weekend, comes home right behind his teammate. A slow pit stop didn't help him in the race either, so other small factors coming into place and why the performance didn't really show in qualifying. He got caught out by the yellow flag, and that potentially cost him getting into Q2 as well. So just falling in the wrong side of the good luck, isn't it, at the moment? Not working for him at the moment, but better, but still, I think a little bit disappointed. You'd expect a little bit more from Esteban Ocon, and it's not quite there yet. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. 14th place man, Sergio Perez, and a much better race than a sprint race. Incident lap 1, wasn't it, with Fernando Alonso? That cost him pace and position in the sprint. In the main race, though, although Valtteri looked like he was closer to him, but Sergio's outdone him in the race. I think Bottas outqualified Perez, but Perez has done it again in the race, faster. Getting closer, upgrades in this Cadillac. They've got a gap to the Aston Martin at the moment. And I don't think there's an awful lot more that Sergio can do. His stock is rising, especially in my books. Been very impressive and impressed with him since his return to Formula One. I think he's just done the job. He can't be. I don't think there's an awful lot more you can expect from this Cadillac. I think points are going to be a little bit off the cards. They need a lot of luck to go their way for that to happen. And if they do come, you expect it to come from Sergio rather than Bottas at the moment. And that says a lot about Sergio's performances. He can be very happy with his weekend, or definitely his race anyway, not his sprint. So I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. 15th place man, Kimi Antonelli. And, well, it should have been a race win. He got the race win for sprint, just missed out on the sprint pole, got the pole for the race. Not a great start, which didn't help him. Small issues, I guess, that potentially cost him a comfortable race victory. Had he not got that bad start, I don't think he would have to push so hard, but an absolutely mega first stint. There's no two ways about it. To go 35 laps on medium, then only just come out, just 7 seconds behind. showed what great pace and what great management of tyres he has. He's really unsung with this car. He's at one. He's managing everything so well. With a young kid on the shoulders, the whole championship pressure, he's just pushing that to one side. And if it wasn't for the car braking, I think there was potential on some points. I think he probably pitted one time too many. I think it was a little bit... I think that was a little bit naive and a bit of a mistake when he jumped straight on into the pits after the initial incident, especially considering he was able to go a little bit longer because he came in, they didn't really do anything, and then they came in again when they could actually see the problem. So had he just been a little bit calmer in that situation, I think he might have pit one less. The off-track limits, we've seen that problem before. I don't think there's an awful lot that can be done about that. I think that's fair game because of what happened to Charles Leclerc in Miami. Difficult when you've got a broken car, but you know, either you retire the car and fix it, or you box and fix it. You retire the car, or you just go really slow and make the corners, in which case you lose position. So I can understand the penalty for the track limits. It's disappointing. And like I said in the watch along, and I think pre-race review is if you're going to, you know, if you're going to get forced off track and then you get these penalties, I think that's harsh. If you're just running off track, I think that's a different story for Kimi. So I think the penalty really is, I'd probably say fair, although I was disappointed with it. And yeah, it was just a heartbreak, kick in the teeth again. The win was on and the car breaks down, and yeah, it's just not working for him at the moment, is it? The luck is not against him, whereas you could argue earlier it was, although he was just doing his job, and I don't say the luck was with him potentially in Canada, but that was a battle with his teammate, and we'd never know the result of that, and he was right in that mix. But since then, he's been phenomenal, the fastest man on track, and an absolute wonder kid, the young GOAT that I've nicknamed him. Had a brilliant weekend this weekend again. I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. 16th place man, Valtteri Bottas. And he'll be disappointed with his race. I guess he was beaten by Sergio Perez. He out-qualified him. Better qualifying pace. He's more closer to Sergio Perez and becoming the Valtteri that we know. He's now not getting hammered by his teammate, but he's still getting beat by his teammate. A little bit what's going on with Ocon, isn't it? It's taken him a bit longer to get used to this car than we kind of expected. And it's almost that testing last year of the Mercedes hindered him because he's got used to driving one type of car, and then now these cars seem to be behaving very differently. And is that something that's actually favoured Perez of just coming clean and driving this car and it's just adapting? Whereas Valtteri's trying to forget something and adapt. And I think that's always slightly harder. And that something we should probably consider. That might be fair. Get me in the comments on that one. But yeah, I think disappointed overall that he's been beaten by his teammate in the race. But better, I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. 17th place man, Carlos Sainz, started the race there, finished there in both sessions. He actually got one of the harshest penalties you can ever get, a penalty lap. Not very rare, very rarely we ever see that given, and that was just because his team instructed him to pass the safety car, even though the message to do that hadn't come out yet. So completely the team's fault. Didn't cost him anything because he was nowhere at that point, but he's been the fastest of the two Williams drivers. I think it was a solid weekend for him, maximised everything that was probably possible out of this Williams car, and he's drove well. Spec B of this car is coming, so promise for him as well. Let's see how it works out for him, but I'm giving him a 6 out of 10. 18th place man, Fernando Alonso. And, well, what can you say about this Aston Martin car? It's an absolute dog. He brings it home, beats his teammate in both for the race and the sprint race. In qualifying, though, we got the surprise, didn't we? Stroll beat Fernando Alonso again. But it doesn't really quite matter with it at the moment. If you've seen some footage of this car, and you can watch, it's all over Twitter, the way the understeer of Stroll with this Aston Martin shows what an absolute dog of a car this is. And so rating these guys just gets a little bit harder, and you just feel you're being so critical of it. But the step in Hungary needs to be huge. And if it isn't, where do they go from there? Big questions to answer. Let's see what they can do next time out. Is going to be another struggle for them in Spa. They're just ticking the races away, aren't they, until they can get to Hungary. Another difficult weekend for him in the Aston Martin. It must be getting harder to keep his head up, or is it just light at the end of the tunnel and praying that Hungary works for them? And I think he's just got to look at it that way to keep positive. Fernando Alonso, I'm giving him a 4 out of 10. 19th place man, Lance Stroll, and a bit like his teammate, you just feel really sorry for this kid. Out-qualified him in the his teammate for qualifying, and that's probably about as good as it gets. He got a penalty for going off track, so that's it's just poor that he didn't really. I understand the car's a dog, but his teammate's not getting penalties like that. Just keep it on track, bring home whatever you can and some findings, or just help the team in whatever way you can. He just seems a little bit too sulky about that. I'm giving him a 3 out of 10 only because of the penalty, and then that's as good as it gets for him. A 3. On to the DNFs, and we'll start with the big one. Max Verstappen, lap 46, caused the safety car that it finished under. Not a mistake from him. The rear wing flap didn't close. Again, that's the second time it has to happen. That's what causes accident in Austria, and he's just not happy with the team at all. He said it's dangerous, really damning comments in the interviews, and it was almost like one of them where the writing's on the wall. I'll say what I want about this team. Absolutely hammered him in the post-race interviews. He was furious at them over team radio once he was in the gravel, and a podium was on, and I think that's what's even more. He absolutely maximised this car. A P3 in the sprint. Qualifying was absolutely brilliant. He said he was going to struggle. The sprint race showed that he had the only car in the top positions which had deg, and seen him go backwards, and that didn't really help him in the sprint race. Qualifying was probably where he expected to be for sprint qualifying. I'd be disappointed in that because there was performance there, clearly in the hands of Isaac Hadjar. And then he just wasn't happy with the team. Even pre-race, he was disappointed that he wasn't starting from the pit lane. Asked what's happening with that, and he said, well, if it was up to me, I'd rather start somewhere else. So was that a hint of I'd rather not be on this grid at the way things are going? They're not listening to me. There was some sort of engine issue. Was furious over the team radio as well. He just sort of stayed quiet and just got on with the job initially. But he said, I've not been saying anything about for a while, and you might have noticed, but the downshifts are absolutely beep, and you can fill in that word however you like. And so, yeah, that disappointment and that friction with him and the team started pre-race. And obviously to have that was just a nail in the coffin at the end, where it was a rear wing failure, which saw him go into the gravel. But other than that, he absolutely maximised the car, and it was a brilliant podium was on. And I think that's what's so disappointing for him. So Max Verstappen, I thought he drove brilliantly. The upgrades in Austria haven't really shone in Silverstone, and that's kind of like a kick down to earth for him. Here in Silverstone, will we see them bounce back like Ferrari have here next time out in Spa? Who knows, but we'll wait and find out. I'm giving him an 8 out of 10. Then comes Alex Albon, DNF'd on lap 43. He finished 18th and behind his teammate in the sprint, out-qualified by his teammate. Just a bad weekend for Alex Albon. Not at one with this car at all. And at the moment, his teammates got the better of him. I'm sure Alex will bounce back. He tends to get on top of things. He's resilient. That's something that really shines about Alex Albon. So rest assured, Alex fans, I'm sure he'll be back. Keep your chins up. He'll turn this around. He usually does. And hopefully that happens when this B-Spec Williams turns up, because I think he's looking forward to it more than most. But a disappointing home race for him, if we can call it that, although he's still a tied national. I'm giving him a 4 out of 10. Next up, Nico Hulkenburg. DNF on lap 36. He looked better and on the pace, especially in qualifying. He was right up there. I mean, in sprint qualifying, he was 4th at one point. So, strong performances from him. Just, I think the missed opportunity. We've seen his teammate get points, and he was generally closer to his teammate. So, but for the DNF, I think points were on the card. So it's hard to judge him too harshly when the car breaks on you. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. On to my predictions review. And I've had some really close calls to some absolute blinders. Nearly got a nail on the head with the sprint qualifying. It was Lewis Hamilton that destroyed it for me, although I was happy he got the pole position. I had Kimi Antonelli for pole, Hamilton second, and Verstappen third. And well, it finished in that order effectively, but Hamilton beat Antonelli in the sprint. For the sprint race, I had Antonelli to win, Hamilton second, and Verstappen third. Well, if it finished in the order that they qualified in, I would look great, but another 2 correct there on the podium, so I'm very happy with that. Lando Norris stole a surprising P3 for me on that one. For the main qualifying, I had Antonelli to be first, Verstappen second, Russell third. It was Kimi Antonelli and a great lap from Charles Leclerc and then Lewis Hamilton, so just the 1 correct. And then for the race, I had Kimi Antonelli to win it, and he would have won it, but for that DNF. I had Hamilton second and Verstappen third, so 2 of them DNF'd. And Verstappen would have got a P3 had he kept it going, and Hamilton would have finished second, but for the safety car pits. But all being said and done, I think I would have got a few wrong because it would have been Antonelli, Leclerc, and then Hamilton. So close, much better predictions from me. But yeah, there we have it. That is the driver ratings, my predictions review. Getting closer and better at these, aren't I, as they've gone on. But there we have it. Thanks for watching. On to Spa next. We've got a week break. Or a weekend break before we go there, so 2 weeks to Spa, but it should be brilliant. The racing so far has been so exciting. The championship is wide open now. Who have you got your pick for the championship? Get in the comments, guys. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. As always, see you on the next one.